He was raised in Omaha. As it happens, Omaha is the hometown of a lot of major actors and television powerhouses. In what must be one of the most striking coincidences in acting history, the paths of two of the great actors of our time crossed in Omaha. Henry Fonda originally wanted to be a newspaperman. 1925, a friend of the family, a young woman, came to him and asked for some help. She needed someone to play the lead in an amateur production at the Omaha Community Playhouse. She was very active in that playhouse, both as an actress and as a director. Well, he did. And that was the end of all of his other ambitions. He fell in love with the profession right then. He decided to be an actor. Within 4 years, he had his first Broadway part, and he was on his way. Now, here's the part of the story that gets kind of Twilight Zone-ish. Remember that young woman back in Omaha who asked Henry Fonda for help, 1925? Well, she had a 1-year-old son. His name was Marlon Brando. By 1939, Henry Fonda was an established star, though much of his best work was still ahead of him. When he was asked to play Abraham Lincoln, he was not at all sure he wanted to do that. He didn't like the idea of playing so large a historical character. He knew everybody already had his or her own impression of Lincoln and what he sounded like and what he acted like. And Mr. Fonda's characterization might intrude. But John Ford talked him into it. And we can be glad about that, as you're about to see. Here's young Mr. Lincoln.
Next on AMC, Raymond Massey gives a magnificent performance.
My name's Nick Clooney. I'm at Radio City Music Hall in Midtown Manhattan. And our star, Raymond Massey, in this movie, said that he played Abraham Lincoln so often on stage and on the radio, he became identified with that role. In fact, there's a famous story about a major radio production being done, live, of course, with Mr. Massey giving Lincoln's poignant farewell to Springfield, Illinois on his fateful journey to Washington and the White House. Train was pulling away on this radio show, heard the wonderful sound effects. He said goodbye, and the voice extras, many of them crying, were calling out, "Goodbye, Abe. Good luck, Abe." Unfortunately, a woman close to the microphone yelled out through her tears, "Goodbye, Mr. Massey. Goodbye." Well, this time, Mr. Massey is Abe Lincoln on film. The film has its own perils. There's a scene that calls for a group of pigs on a raft go over a waterfall. The scene could only be done once. It would take 8 hours to get the raft back in position after it went over the waterfall, so they couldn't do that, didn't have enough time. Well, the pigs were great. No rehearsal. They did the scene in just one take. Still, it did take a couple of days just to set that shot up. So after 4 days of filming, they had about 1 minute, a little less actually, 50 seconds that could be used on the final film. Okay, another scene called for some deer to run through a shot. They used local deer, and the animals gave a pretty good performance considering, you know, they're just locals and they were not from central casting. But as happens often, the deer were left on the cutting room floor. You won't even see them. After 3 weeks, in fact, on location, they had less than 8% of the film in the can. The cast and crew went back to Hollywood to an RKO backlot to finish the picture. They filmed the Lincoln-Douglas debates there, where the temperature was 101 degrees, a lot hotter than it was in beautiful Ottawa, Illinois, when the actual first debate took place. Let's watch Raymond Massey, Ruth Gordon, Gene Lockhart. Darn good film. Abe Lincoln in Illinois. The really fine actor Raymond Massey received the only Oscar nomination of his entire distinguished career for his work in this film, Abe Lincoln in Illinois. He lost to James Stewart for The Philadelphia Story. A footnote, showings of Abe Lincoln in Illinois were picketed by civil rights activists back in 1940, the year this film was released. Here was a story about Abraham Lincoln, the man who freed the slaves, and it was being shown in a number of all-white theaters where blacks were denied admittance. Raymond Massey had the honor of sitting next to Franklin Delano Roosevelt during a special presidential performance of this movie, Abe Lincoln in Illinois. And here's what he said. He said that Mr. Roosevelt turned to him and said, "Mr. Massey, don't you find that amazing? Lincoln wrote all those speeches himself." That was Charles Middleton who played Lincoln's father. Some of you may remember him as Ming the Merciless in the Flash Gordon serial. Can't ever forget that wonderful face. Of course, you remember Raymond Massey, among many other things. This talented native of Canada played Richard Chamberlain's mentor in the TV series Dr. Kildare. Now watch this.
Mom, is this a